Chapter 2651, Desperation. Chapter 2651. Desperation. The elder who spoke was the old city lord of Tianyan, and he was an old monster-level existence. When he first made his name, Donghuang the Great might not have been born yet. After he had handed Tianyan City over to the younger generations, he had been devoting himself to cultivation, trying to break the shackles and enter the imperial realm. However, that step proved too challenging to reach, so he had some ideas about alternative methods. It was a road that had never been taken by anyone else before, so he had been randomly moving about, not knowing whether it would be successful or how many years it might take. However, he had never expected that one day, Tianyan City would face a great catastrophe that would require his intervention to help Tianyan City to survive. Wang Zhan, the old city lord of Tianyan, called out to him. Wang Zhan was the name of the current city lord of Tianyan. Get the grand matrix of Tianyan ready. Even if the old ancestor is no longer, we will kill as many as we can. I haven't had to do this myself for a very long time. The old city lord's eyes were full of terrible light, and murderous intent was burning within them. Yes, Wang Zhan took the order, and then made all the arrangements. The cultivators of Tianyan City had received the news, and cultivators from all sides began to gather in Tianyan City. For a time, an invisible pressure shrouded Tianyan City, making it extremely tense. This situation was similar to when the 6 ancient god clans had descended upon Ziwei Segmentum. Only now had the situation had reversed. It was Tianyan City that was facing this tremendous crisis. No one had imagined that Tianyan City, once flourishing and prosperous, would have a day like this. Time passed little by little, and Tianyan City began to put various countermeasures in place. Finally, in the sky above Tianyan City, a group of cultivators descended with horrific coercion as they passed over Tianyan City. They are here. Within the bounds of Tianyan City, countless cultivators raised their heads to look at the group that had appeared in the sky. Their hearts were beating wildly. Futian and the others had arrived, coming for Tianyan City. There were not many of them who came, but everyone was in existence that had survived the divine tribulation of the Great Path. The man in the lead was Futian. They were moving extremely fast, and it did not take long before they appeared in the sky above the city lord's office. The city lord's office was so vast that it was akin to a massive and magnificent golden city, showing a metallic luster under the sun. Wang Zhan, the city lord of Tianyan, looked up at the sky above and saw Futian and the others standing above the city lord's office. A strong murderous intent swept over the city, as everyone who stood in the void was full of murder. Feeling the aura from them, Wang Zhan's eyes sharpened. He saw that Futian was flanked on both sides by the supreme elder of Ziwei Segmentum, Lord Chun, and Futian's wife, Hua Jiyu. They were both cultivators who had survived the second divine tribulation of the Great Path. Coupled with Futian's terrifying strength, there were 3 peak-level cultivators with the Ziwei Segmentum. In addition, some more powerful cultivators had survived the first divine tribulation of the Great Path, like Taoist monk Mu, Morong Yu, Emperor Shi, Blind Tai, Gu Donglu, Yang Wuchi Fong Xiyuan, as well as the mysterious Hua Qingqing, and the Millet Emperor with Wangshan Watchtower in tow. Such a powerful group of cultivators instilled great fear in the cultivators' hearts from the city lord's office of Tianyan City, and all of them trembled with fear. The makeup of the group in front of them was not something that any one ancient god clan could contend with by itself. Even with all the forces summoned by Tianyan City, remained something beyond their reach. Could there still be any hope for Tianyan City? Outside the city lord's office, the hearts of the cultivators from Tianyan City were beating fiercely. This group was too incredible to be believed. Who would have thought that once upon a time Lord Chun was the only cultivator in Ziwei Segmentum who had survived the divine tribulation of the Great Path? He had been the one person who was able to do anything. Within 100 years, the Ziwei Segmentum, which was unsealed and inherited by Futian, had become such a powerful force. What fantastic growth this was! This was the first time that the Ziwei Segmentum had mobilized so many of its top cultivators. And their first battle was to take place in Tianyan City, Launch the heaven-tempering divine matrix. The city lord gave an icy command, and suddenly golden divine lights shot out from the city lord's office, heading higher into the sky. Countless divine lights converged and intersected above the firmament like pillars that passed beyond the sky. Soon, a boundless and massive divine pattern formed above the firmament, covering the entire Tianyin city lord's office. It was the heaven-tempering divine matrix, a most terrifying divine matrix. Inside the city lord's office, all the divine lights were gathering towards the sky as if to temper everything in the world. Buzz! The old city lord's figure flashed and reappeared high above the sky. His great path domain and the heaven-tempering divine matrix had merged into one. His whole body was radiant and surrounded by divine light, as it continued to expand until he resembled a mighty god from heaven who could not be denied. Since you came here to die, don't bother going back, the old city lord of Tianyin said loudly and clearly, so that everyone inside and outside the city lord's office could hear his unmistakably overbearing voice. He said, "If anyone thinks they can save Tianyin city lord's office, you may freely make your move." Having said that, he continued to stare at the city lord of Tianyin, who was below, and said, "People of Ziwei Imperial Palace, here is your order, kill at will." "Yes, Palace Lord." All of them took the order and moved at the same time towards the city lord's office of Tianyin. Every cultivator was filled with the terrifying aura of the tribulation plane. Inside the city lord's office in Tianyin City, traces of powerful aura erupted. They had no choice now but to fight. The terrifying aura of the Great Path exploded successively as the top cultivators from Tianyin City marched towards the sky toward the oncoming battle. Humph! Lord Chen gave a cold snort and pointed the starry scepter in his hand forward. Suddenly, extremely heavy coercion fell upon the entire city lord's office. A dull sound came from the space, and many felt that they had encountered a power of suppression that simply wouldn't budge. Chen Yi's body turned into a ray of light, and it was gone in a flash. That ray of light passed through one body after another. In an instant, several cultivators were pierced by the light as their bodies gradually turned into light and disappeared. Hua Jiyu moved her mind slightly, and suddenly many felt their bodies were becoming still. Her eyes were cold, infused with murderous intent. Everything that Tianyin City had done to Yi Futian was unforgivable. Blind Tai, Fang Siyuan, and other cultivators went down one after another like tigers that had torn into a flock of sheep. With such an absolute gap in strength, there was no way the cultivators from the city lord's office could stop them. The fight was completely one-sided. More frightening was that soon cultivators in the first tribulation plane began falling. Yi Futian stood there without moving, as if he was just observing the situation. He stood there like a deity, holding the imperial arms, the sky tremoring. Wang Zhan, the city lord of Tianyin, clearly did not dare to move, as the coercion was hovering right above him. As soon as he made a move, it was possible that Yi Futian would retaliate. The cultivators from Donghuang Imperial Palace and Tianyin Domain Chief's Manor, likewise, were watching all that was happening in front of them, and they were not pleased. Yi Futian had ignored them, and had gone ahead to clean up Tianyin City Lord's office. If someone could save the City Lord's office, all they needed to do was take direct action. This meant that as soon as they attacked, Yi Futian would join the fight. It didn't matter to him one way or the other. Today, in Tianyin City, the destruction of Tianyin City Lord's office seemed to be a foregone conclusion. All the cultivators in the area below the City Lord's office were feeling quite desperate. They couldn't see a way out in front of them, only a dead end. Chapter 2653, Desolation. Chapter 2653, Desolation. The City Lord of Tianyin died on his knees. There was a dead silence inside the City Lord's office. All the fighting had ceased as everyone looked at the place where Wang Zhan had perished. There were cracks on the ground, causing the entire City Lord's office to split. The faces of everyone in the Wang family were full of despair. Even the people from the Imperial Palace in the Divine Prefecture could not stop Yi Futian's slaughter, and no one tried to save them. Tianyin City Lord's office was left to be slaughtered by the others, without any ability to fight back. Once upon a time, Tianyan City was a flourishing principality that was respected. Anyone from the city lord's office, especially the descendants of the Wang family, was proud and confident. Wherever they went, they were held in high esteem and admired. Who would have thought that a day like this would be possible? All because of a cultivator from the original realm. Who was the one responsible for this calamity? The cultivators outside the city lord's office were speechless as well. They were witnessing the demise of the city lord's office. The fact remained that the entire Tianyan city was controlled by the city lord's office. The destruction of the city lord's office at this moment was incredibly poignant in its sorrow. This also meant that the glory of Tianyan city had disappeared forever. From now on, Tianyan city would no longer be the main city of Tianyan domain, and would never return to its former glory. The cultivators from the imperial palace and the Tianyan domain chief's manor lowered their heads to look there, coming to the same conclusion in their hearts. No one could have dissuaded Yi Futian from destroying Tianyan city, and no one could stop him. If they had insisted, Yi Futian would probably have no qualms combating them with the imperial arms. No one here would dare to claim they could counter Yi Futian's attack with the imperial arms. After all, his strength was already at the peak, and only someone at Feng Ru's level could even attempt to try. Even if there was anger, they could only watch everything happening in front of them. Unfortunately, the great emperor had promised not to raise his hand against Yi Futian, or else he could never have acted with such impunity. After Yi Futian had executed Wang Zhan, the city lord of Tianyan, he looked at the cultivators in front of him as he levitated in the sky, surveying the vast city lord's office. He said, "Uncle Tai, direct the others to collect all the valuable divine arms, armoring methods and materials in Tianyan city." "Yes," Blind Tai acknowledged. He took several people with him as their divine consciousness moved through the city lord's office and began plundering. "Whoever makes a move will be killed without mercy," Yi Futian announced as he glanced at the crowd beneath him. Chapter 2654 Slaves. Chapter 2654 Slaves. The destruction of Tianyan city lord's office shocked the entire divine prefecture, and the news quickly spread all over the land. The ancient god clans were the first to receive the news. Even after they withdrew from the Ziwei segmentum, they had been keeping close tabs there. They had a feeling that Yi Futian would start with Tianyan city first. After the death of Tianyan the Great, Tianyan city became the only ancient god clan without the protection of a great emperor's will. How could Yi Futian miss such an excellent opportunity to take them down? Sure enough, they soon received the news that Tianyan city lord's office was destroyed and Wang Zhan, the city lord of Tianyan, killed. He had died on his knees. This news greatly alarmed the other ancient god clans, becoming even more vigilant. After all, there was a precedent in front of them. If Yi Futian were that strong, sooner or later, he would come to destroy them, just as he did with Tianyan city. In addition, after some forces, such as the domain chief manors of both the West Sea domain and the Donghua domain, learned of the news, they were greatly troubled. Chief Shihai and Ning Yuan, the domain chief of Donghua, knew very well that if it were not because they were directly under the command of Donghuang Imperial Palace, which Yi Futian still heeded, he would have already started in on them. Now there was a sharp sword hanging above all of their heads. This sword may fall at any given time, and they would not have a moment's peace. They heard that when Yi Futian destroyed the Tianyan city lord's office, the people from the imperial palace were present, but did nothing to stop it. Yi Futian had the imperial arms, the sky tremoring, in his possession, so people from the imperial palace just watched the city lord's office be destroyed. An ancient god clan such as Tianyan city was a principality in the land of the divine prefecture, the premier armoring force in the divine prefecture, and the most powerful force in the Tianyan domain. Yet it disappeared just like that, and became part of the past. It was said that after Yi Futian and the others left, the city lord's office was raided by other cultivators inside Tianyan city. Many cultivators Yi Futian spared were brutally murdered by the people of Tianyan city, and met a miserable end. The horrific nature and cruelty of men were played out so vividly in Tianyan city. They were all believers when things were going well, but in times of need, They chose to pick up the swords and join in the slaughter. Many lamented and grieved. After this battle, no one did not know of Yi Futian's name in the land of the Divine Prefecture. All the cultivators at Ziwei Imperial Palace were eagerly waiting for the return of Yi Futian and the others. When they learned of the destruction of Tianyan City Lord's office, the people of Ziwei Imperial Palace were extremely excited. The principalities of Tianyan City had moved against them more than once, and twice they had used imperial arms on Ziwei. Now they were finally destroyed, and justice had been served. In the Imperial Palace, they watched those cultivators from Tianyan City Lord's office who had been taken prisoner. Each of them wore cold expressions and fierce murderous intent raged about them. Those from the Tianyan City Lord's office only felt tremendously sorry for themselves. Now, they had indeed fallen into the lion's den, and there was probably no hope for them ever. Uncle Tai, give Lord Chen the divine arms and implements that we have taken from the City Lord's office in Tianyan City, and have him distribute them among the 5 palaces and the protectors. Each protector may take a few suitable pieces. The rest can be divided equally among the 5 palaces as their cultivation resources. The lords of each palace will be in charge of them and may allocate them as they see fit. Yi Futian continued to speak to Blind Tai. Also, the resources for armoring that we have taken will be handed over to the armoring palace to be at your disposal, including all the armoring methods and materials. I suggest that we build an armory inside Ziwei Imperial Palace and store these items and all the implements and divine arms that we will be making in the future. What do you think? Good. Blind Tai nodded. Everyone else agreed. Now they had taken all the resources of Tianyan City, including the method of armoring and various other resources. In the future, the level of armoring in Ziwei Imperial Palace will undoubtedly continue to improve. Conceivably, more and more divine arms and implements would be made, hence the need to build an armory. Everything else aside, just the divine arms they had looted this time from Tianyan City Lord's office were incredible. They had pretty much transported their entire treasure trove here. However, Yi Futian did not hide them somewhere else. Instead, he wanted them to be divided equally among the 5 palaces. This was the first time they had gone out to seek the destruction of an ancient god clan. They couldn't keep all the treasures and lock them inside the imperial palace. If he wanted to use this event to strengthen his people as a whole and ensure their loyalty to the Ziwei Imperial Palace, he had to do more than talk. At the very least, Ziwei Imperial Palace had to prove its value to the others, or else they had no reason to risk their lives for Ziwei. The 5 palaces each needed their resources. Previously they had the pills he produced, and now they had divine arms at their disposal. Not only did all these items significantly improve their strengths, but they made cultivators from each palace feel that they were part of the Ziwei Imperial Palace. They shared woes as well as fortune. If any gains were to be had, all of them would partake and benefit together. Although Yi Futian had never asked, he knew that West Imperial Palace must have made significant progress by now. Ziwei Imperial Palace is now adding armoring to alchemy. In the future, you will probably not just be the strongest principality in alchemy, but also the premier force in armoring. If you are interested, we can be partners in armoring. West Imperial Palace can provide you with armoring materials, and you can provide us divine arms, Shi Qiyao proposed with a smile. Yi Futian smiled and looked at her. The armoring level of the armoring palace is still quite limited, and Uncle Tai has not yet reached the realm he needs to be at. The resources seized from Tianyan City are enough for us for many years to come. Even if the West Imperial Palace provides us with materials, we will not use them right now. If the needs arise in the future, I will ask you. It's a pity then. We want to deepen our partnership with Ziwei Imperial Palace, but Palace Lord Yi has refused us mercilessly, Shi Qiyao joked. Yi Futian smiled and shook his head. Ziwei Imperial Palace and West Imperial Palace have always been very friendly. Why would Goddess Qiyao think it needs more? Of course, more the better. Shi Qiyao's beautiful eyes were now directed at Yi Futian. If the old man can have his way, he would rather unite Ziwei Imperial Palace and West Imperial Palace in marriage. Those around Shichiyao were stunned when they heard these words. What did she mean by that? If Ziwei Imperial Palace were to join West Imperial Palace in marriage, who else could it be but the two of them? Yi Futian was stunned as well. He didn't know quite how to continue the conversation for a while. Shichiyao smiled and proceeded. Of course I thought not. That would make it too easy for you. The cultivators behind Shichiyao looked at each other, and an old man whispered, if the goddess disagrees, why bother telling others? However, he immediately lowered his head and kept quiet after he said it. Indeed, his remark stunned Shichiyao momentarily. She slowly turned around and focused her attention on the old man who spoke. Her face was a little red. You talk too much, Shichiyao said with temper in her voice. As the goddess, she still needed to keep her dignity. I am sorry I spoke too fast, the old man explained. What I meant was that if the goddess doesn't agree with the idea, there is no need to say it out loud. Shichiyao stared at him. She could almost shoot fireballs from her eyes. Was this old B*** deliberately trying to annoy her? If it were not because he was an elder, Shichiyao would have already stabbed the old man with her sword. An alliance through marriage is not impossible, Yi Futian piped up. Shichiyao, stunned by this unexpected response, turned around and looked at Yi Futian intently with those beautiful eyes of hers. Yi Futian smiled and continued. Now there are many excellent young men at Ziwei Imperial Palace. Chapter 2656, Shocks to the Seven Realms. Chapter 2656, Shocks to the Seven Realms. A shock from outside the heavens. At this moment, everyone in the Ziwei segmentum could feel this rumble, and their hearts trembled along with it. Were they under attack again? By now, there had been a dark cloud hovered over them psychologically. However, they soon discovered that it was not an attack after all. They saw the glow above the firmament, which was endlessly radiant. It was terribly far away, and yet they could perceive it. One could imagine just how far and wide this glow's coverage was, and how brilliant the light was. Otherwise, they would not have been able to see something so far away. What is happening? Countless people wondered. Yi Futian didn't know what was happening either. Inside the Ziwei Imperial Palace, many people levitated into the sky as they looked higher into the heavens. All of them appeared surprised. Palace Lord! Master! Many people called out to Yi Futian. Come with me to take a look, Yi Futian said. And a group of people moved along with him, heading outside the heavens. They were moving fast and shuttled through the void. It didn't take them long before they were outside of the bounds of the Ziwei segmentum. The glow had diffused and illuminated the boundless space, lighting up the space of void outside the Ziwei segmentum. Yi Futian felt a peculiar aura. It seemed as if the space in the void was no longer a void, and that the divine light, which continued to spread, seemed intent on illuminating and shrouding over the entire original realm. This, Yi Futian felt something unusual. It seemed these strange visions were displayed. The original realm may be facing some drastic changes that have yet to come. Exactly what kind of power could have such an effect on the original realm? The original realm was a broken world resulting from the collapse of the heavenly path. It had an endless number of empty spaces, but now this power seemed to be restoring the original realm. What kind of power was capable of such a terrifying effect? Yi Futian walked towards the divine light. That area seemed to be expanding towards the original realm. The divine light likewise was growing as well. What a strong will of the great path! Lord Chen exclaimed. That extremely pure atmosphere of the great path, astonishing even him. After a long time, they finally got a clue. The place where the divine light was spreading outward seemed to be a vast expanse of barren land with absolutely no signs of life, a veritable desert. In that desert landscape, there was an incomparable will of the great path that continued to spread outward, and it seemed to be a different will of the great path. That barren land was like the land from prehistorical times, primordial and greatly transmuted. Many magnificent buildings were resurrected in that barren land, including some impressive statues. What he saw in front of him greatly impacted Yi Futian's senses. Chapter 2657, All arrived. Chapter 2657. All arrived in the land of the original realm, in the space of the void, A series of stunning light beams appeared in different directions, illuminating the surrounding area. Afterward, cultivators came out of those spatial light beams one after another. Those beams were passageways from the other worlds to the original realm. Numerous mighty cultivators came walking out of these passageways. It was as if great legions of the army had descended upon this place. Observing beneath any of these channels, one could see that these channels were no longer closed, as people were pouring out of them continuously, an endless stream of people that had never stopped. And it was not just one passageway. Many of them had appeared in the original realm. Furthermore, these kinds of channels continued to increase in number, with more and more of them appearing with each passing moment. Cultivators from all the worlds were coming here. Any cultivator who was at the level of Runhuang and above will want to come to take a look-see. As the news spread, those below the realm of Runhuang were also itching to go to the original realm, but it was not yet their turn. Or rather, even if they had arrived in the original realm, they would not be able to compete for anything. On the way to the tombs of the gods, Futian and the others saw that in different directions in the distance, aside from the divine light that continued to spread, splendid spatial passageways were appearing in the original realm. These passageways seemed to spread all over the original realm and multiply. "They are all here," someone next to him commented. Their hearts became greatly unsettled. No one expected that these people would come here so quickly. Before they had a chance, cultivators from the other worlds had already opened up the channels and descended in the original realm. "It's probably an order from the great emperor himself," Futian said. Without the great emperor's order, cultivators in various worlds would not have reacted so quickly and opened up many spatial channels. Only the order from the great emperor and the concerted efforts from all parties could make this possible. It seemed that the news here had attracted the attention of all the worlds. Finally, they were getting close to the tombs of the gods. The tombs of the gods were not a place of burial, nor was it an entire continent. Much like the divine prefecture, it was a barren world formed by a chain of many continental plates, an ancient battleground. They could feel a primordial sensation when they stood on this barren land. The Great Path's aura was vastly different from the ones in the world today. Will the Great Path aura of this world cover the entire original realm and integrate with the original realm? Futian wondered. If this were the case, the original realm would become the absolute center and the true main world. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Now that the tombs of the gods have appeared, naturally, it is part of it. Everything is part of fate. How will become of the tombs of the gods? What is the endgame of the changes between heaven and earth? Has the Buddha foresee it? The evil emperor asked. He seemed to be a little curious. He did not believe in these prophecies from the Buddhists, but it did not mean that he didn't want an explanation or know what the others had to say about it. Amitabha. The Buddha put his hands together. He chanted the Buddha's name, saying, "All things rise and fall according to their karma." "You bald donkey, why can't you say something we understand? Who can understand this stupid riddle?" The devil emperor cursed under his breath and did not bother to be polite. The Buddha smiled without saying another word, still clasping his hands together. The 6 great emperors chatted together casually like old friends, and the people of the world listened quietly. Many people were quite shaken by it. The great emperors had been to the tombs of the gods, so they did not intend to interfere this time. The change between heaven and earth originated in the original realm. This prophecy first came from the Buddhist realm, and was not some frivolous rumor. It was a prophecy acknowledged by the Lord of all Buddhas. Everything rises and falls according to their karma. What did that mean exactly? Futian was also meditating on the meaning of this saying, but he couldn't quite grasp its significance. What would happen to the future of the original realm? As of now, no one knew for sure. Since none of you objected, then let's agree that we will not interfere with anything that happened here, proposed Donghuang the Great. The tomb of the gods appeared, and one could only imagine the kind of chaos that would ensue. Even the war at the North Cliff region in the Divine Prefecture could not be compared to this. And it would be even more chaotic and out of order than the previous war, because the cultivators from the same world or even from the same principality, when faced with the temptation of items left behind by the great emperors, would fight against one another and resort to using lethal forces. Since you don't have any objections, we don't either, the evil emperor replied, as everyone acquiesced. Soon, all the phantoms disappeared from the passageways. It was as if they had never been there in the first place. When they disappeared, those spatial passages leading from other worlds to the divine prefecture were also closed up. All the cultivators from various imperial-level forces were already sent to this land that re-emerged from ancient times. None of the emperors would have a hand in whatever happens next. This was good news for all the cultivators. If the great emperors were to interfere, there would be nothing left for them. However, it may also be interpreted as bad news. Heaven and earth shook violently, colliding with the golden condor. Blind Tai was knocked back and past Futian and the others. The golden divine condor stopped. His wings spread wide to cover the sky and shelter the sun as the wild wind was blowing hard. There was a terrible aura from his eyes. He held a look of terrible contempt. It was as if he was a proud emperor looking at some tiny insects. Futian's eyes swept toward those arrogant eyes. He thought that a great demon, born from the tombs of the gods, perhaps tinged with the will of the great emperor, accounted for his arrogant posture. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2659, The Abyss. Chapter 2659, The Abyss. In addition to that arrogance, Futian also detected a fierce and violent aura from the opponent's eyes. It seemed as if he had neither soul nor spirit. Futian's spiritual will penetrated through the opponent's eyes, and a terrible spiritual storm was unleashed towards his opponent. Indeed, he sensed that the soul of the condor was tumultuous, and he could feel an intense lust for blood and brutality from the beast. Buzz! As the violent wind blew past them, the condor made a shrill sound and dove towards Futian. His sharp claws slashed down like golden sharp blades that were indestructible. Its immense form greatly oppressed those in the surrounding areas. The divine light of the great path circled Futian. His figure disappeared from where he was in a flash, then collided with the beast. The head-on collision between man and beast was without any fancy moves. Sounds of explosions caused a violent storm around the two, and even the space seemed to be splitting open. Futian's body of the great path was a frightful sight as he unleashed one attack after another, blasting his opponent ceaselessly. However, the condor did not appear to know the meaning of pain, as it continued to slaughter forward. However, with Futian's violent attacks, his opponent's speed slowed down more. His body gradually became frozen, eroded by the power of Yin. The cold currents of Yin invaded the opponent's massive torso, weakening the opponent's body by making it more fragile. Finally, Futian blasted a punch onto his opponent's body. It was like a slash from a sharp sword. Thus, he was able to shatter the condor's body into bits and pieces, pulverized into nothing. In the back, cultivators from Ziwei Imperial Palace trembled in their hearts when they saw this scene. Such a wild demonic beast was destroyed by Futian, which could only demonstrate the horrific attack power that he was capable of. What kind of demonic beast was that? It was crazed. Lord Chen stepped forward and said in a low voice. He knew just how powerful Futian was. It was quite impressive that this condor could directly engage with Futian like that. A malefactor conceived in the tombs of the gods can no longer be treated as anything ordinary. That condor has to be a malefactor formed in a chaotic environment. Although he was covered with the aura of the great emperor, it was a confusing mess without reason, Futian explained. However, this also confirms a point. Now that the tombs of the gods have appeared, it is of great benefit for cultivators to cultivate on this ancient land. The expansion of this world will affect the entire original realm, strengthening the power of those who cultivate. However, the differentiation will also be more pronounced. Lord Chen nodded. The appearance of the tombs of the gods will lead to subsequent battles, which may cause this ancient continent to be divided up. The stronger cultivators will eventually control the best cultivation environment. For the Ziwei segmentum, this is also a huge opportunity for us, Futian said. This opportunity was unprecedented. An opportunity brought on by the significant changes between heaven and earth. Ziwei segmentum needed to get a hold of it. The appearance of the tombs of the gods would directly affect the strengths and weaknesses in each world. The great emperors had promised not to interfere, so only the mortals were left to fight amongst themselves. Let's go! Futian and his party continued to move forward. It didn't take long before they came across yet another demonic beast flying through the sky. This demonic beast was equally frightening, formed in a rather peculiar way. It could not be qualified as any specific type of demonic beast. It had a horse's head with the wings of a condor, which was something that simply did not exist in the world. Perhaps it was something that had been created under special circumstances. This space seems to have bred a lot of strange alien species. Stay alert and stay together, Futian reminded everyone. These alien species had amazing strength. If they encountered the same alien species as the condor previously, it could be very dangerous for them. Everyone nodded. They were alarmed by what had just happened. No one knew what was on this barren wasteland, so it was best that they did not rush. What was that sound? Futian stopped, but his divine consciousness continued to reach into the distance. Faintly, he could sense a sound coming this way, and the other cultivators also listened intently. One after another, they heard some kind of sound. Futian continued to walk towards where the sound was coming from. As they moved forward, that sound became clearer and clearer. It was not the voice of someone speaking, but an extraordinary sound. It was as if it was coming from a primordial time. One could even say that this sound was rather annoying, but they were heading in that direction to find out. After a while, they came upon a place, and the ground in front of them had cracked open, and an abyss had formed. This abyss was vast with no bottom in sight. The sound seemed to be coming from within. Futian and the others slowed down, and their divine consciousness spread inside. But soon they found themselves blocked. Their divine consciousness was not able to enter inside the abyss. As they approached, a dangerous aura descended upon them, and Futian shuddered. He was becoming terribly alarmed. His keen perception was telling him that this abyss was incredibly dangerous. None of you move, Futian said, telling everyone to stop. Everyone nodded and stopped right where they were. Futian walked forward alone, and came to the edge of the abyss, and looked inside of it. In the depth of that endless abyss, the sound continued to be heard, and there was a mysterious aura.